Hi, Addison.
Hey, Chris. How are you
Welcome.
doing?
Good. How are you?
I'm well, thanks.
We got most people joining in here.
Waiting for me?
We weren't going to start without you, since you're the vice chair in charge today. So,
Right.
I
Hopefully I don't mess it up.
I'm sure you'll do fine. We do have new members today. I don't know if you want to take a minute to introduce them once we do the welcome, but we have two new members on the call and maybe a third joining us. But in any case, we're all set. It looks like everybody's got connectivity and video, and we have our AV assistant, Joe Rice, in the background if needed, but I think you can go ahead and proceed.
Okay. Well, do we want to introduce the new members first?
Sure.
I know Jonathan Jason, so he's here. Welcome, Jonathan. And that's
all the introduction I need. So
yeah, there you go.
Addison knows me.
I know him.
So.
Wells Fargo Advisors, I believe.
That's correct.
I'm very excited when I saw, that he was joining this board. But Chris, you're going to have to introduce our other member.
Yeah, so we had three new members appointed about 2 months ago. Jonathan Chasen was one of them. Jiraiya Guerrero is another. He's on the call here. He's with Jaunt, the paratransit service here locally. Jiraiya, you want to say hello?
Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. As Chris mentioned, I'm Jiraiya Guerrero. I'm with Jaunt. Just real quick about me. I'm not originally from Virginia. I moved out here about 6 years ago. Finally getting myself, I think, settled. So I thought it was time to start being a part of the community, and the Board of Economics, really sparked my interest. So this is kind of the career path I'm pursuing, economics and things like that. So I thought this would be a great place to start and get engaged with the community a little bit more.
Great. Thank you. And then our other new member is Reed Thompson. I don't see him on the call. He will be, he is with a local bank. And
I'm here.
Oh, Reed. Sorry.
Yeah. Yeah.
There you are. You fell off my screen somehow.
Joined.
I didn't see you come on.
Okay.
Sorry. My apologies. Reed, go ahead and say a few words about yourself. A little background.
Sure. Very happy to be here. I'm Reed Thompson. I work with Fulton Mortgage Company. And pretty recently, I've been with UVA the past few years, and that's actually how I met Chris doing Project Rebound last year, and had a lot of fun doing that, and was thrilled when he asked me if I'd be interested in joining this board. Very excited to learn more about what's going on in the city, be involved in some of the decisions, and I see a lot of the residential real estate side of things. It'll be fun to see some of what's going on the larger scale commercial side as well. So very excited to be here and excited for our first meeting.
Great. Okay.
Great.
All
Welcome.
right,
Well,
Vice Chair, go ahead.
yeah, we will call the meeting to order. Are there any members from the public who would like to make any comments? All right, seeing none. We have the consent agenda to start off with, which is the minutes, approval of the minutes from the March 9th, 2021 meeting. So any comments on the minutes, or if none, do we have a motion to accept the minutes from March?
I'll move.
Any seconds?
Second.
All right, all in favor? Say aye.
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 Okay, so the minutes are accepted. And so that means we're gonna move right along to new business. Well, no, I guess that's not true. We've got the treasurer's report. Is that Chris? Is there anything in the treasurer's report that's worth noting, or that we need to review with the group, or anyone have any comments or questions about that?
Yeah, nothing particularly unusual. You do have 3 months worth, given the fact that we did not meet the last month or two, but you've got February, March, and April of 2021 in your packet, and happy to answer any questions if anybody has any. Otherwise, would seek your acceptance of those as well.
Addison, I've got a quick question. Hey, Chris, Addison asked about this last time, and I apologize if I'm repeating what he asked, is that on the performance agreements that I see that it's in the budget as revenues and expenditures because it's just passing through the EDA, but it's not passed through yet. Does that happen at the end of the fiscal year?
It's a good question. It actually just happened. It typically does happen towards the latter part of the fiscal year. It happened in May, so it will be reflected on your May financials, which you'll see next month. But we are just through April at this point. So yes, it does kind of look like it's hanging out there most of the year, but those funds did come in May and they did go out in May.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions or comments on the treasurer's report? All right, seeing none, do we have a motion to accept that report?
So moved.
Second,
Second.
all in favor, say aye.
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 All right, great. Well, that brings us to new business.
Okay, I'm happy to walk you through these two items. These are both related to the pavilion. For the newer members in your orientation, I probably touched on the fact that the EDA manages the long-term lease with the operator of the pavilion, and occasionally that requires some adjustments or some back and forth or some agreements to be updated in the course of that long-term lease. And today is one of those cases. So we have two items. The first is a resolution to modify the promissory note. So there's a loan in place between the EDA and the operator. And this is part of a loan that was loaned to them as part of the construction back in 2004, 2005 timeframe. And they are in the process of paying that back over about a 30-year period. Due to COVID and the impacts of the pandemic that started last year and essentially shut down the ability for any entertainment, as you all are aware. We were requested last year and have been requested again this year to modify the promissory note to allow a pause in the payments and an extension of the term. So essentially what you see in front of you today, it's included in your packet, is a document that modifies the promissory note, extends the term of the loan one additional year, and alleviates the need for them to make payments in this cycle. So they pay twice per year, and so they would be relieved of 2 additional payments. And it doesn't absolve them from paying the funds, it just delays it, and interest does continue to accrue as it did with the modification that was approved actually in June of last year. So the timing is very similar. So that's an overview of that item. If anybody has any particular questions, I'd be happy to try and answer those. There's actually 2 documents in your packet. One is the resolution that would seek the authority's approval of such an item, and the other is the actual modification to the note, which is what would go to accompany the note, identifying the changes in the terms.
I'm just curious, Chris, as to whether or not they came to us to ask for this for a second year in a row, or if we go to them. I'm just wondering about process more than anything else.
Yes, they initiated this request in both years, although I would say it was not a surprise in either one, given the situation regarding the impact to live entertainment, indoors or outdoors for most of this time.
Chris, what was kind of the thinking with regard to relieving the payments all the way through December of this year?
Yeah, that's a good question. We did have some discussion on that. We ultimately settled on the idea of keeping it simple and in conjunction with the one that was passed last year, not knowing exactly when and how many events will actually take place this year. They are programming. In fact, when this request came through, it was unclear as to whether they would be programming. And as this note was being modified, it was unclear when and if the governor was going to change some of the rules to allow them to get back into business. So given those unknowns, we just simply repeated what we did last year, which was relieve them for the need to make 2 payments and keep that cycle nice and simple. They are certainly able to prepay, and they are able to make a payment once revenues continue or restart. So this does not preclude them from doing that in any way. There's no prepayment penalty, if you will, on this note, as there are on many other notes. So they're not precluded from doing that, but they're also not required to make another payment until they get a little bit of track record behind them in terms of events happening and revenues restarting. But that's a good question.
All right, thanks.
Chris, just historically, I see that they modified the note in 2018. Do you remember what that was for?
What was that for? It was not related to this, but there was there's been 3 modifications. I'd have to go back and double check exactly what that was for.
Yeah, no, you don't need to do that. I was more just curious.
Yeah, I can follow up with you offline and let you know, but there have been 3, as you can see by the third, the language on top of the modification, the third modification.
Mm-hmm. Well, anyone else have any questions or comments about this modification?
Yes, does foregoing that revenue this year and last year have any sort of material effect on our office on CEDA?
Another good question. And for the newer board members, you were not on board when we passed the most recent budget, which is the FY22 budget, which will start July 1st of 2021, so in less than a month. But we typically pass the budget in the March timeframe, and this was anticipated. So there's a reduction in revenues anticipated from this line item for the next fiscal year. It's not completely zeroed out because the payments do cross over fiscal years, and we would see some of that as at least as we were anticipating at the time. A good half of the fiscal year would see event activity, and then potentially some in even the impacted half. But in any case, we did anticipate lower revenue from this line item for next year, and we did not impact negatively any of our programming, but we pulled some funds from reserve to cover that. And once these payments restart, we'll be back on track to rebuild that reserve.
Well, is there a motion to approve this modification of the note?
So moved.
Second?
I'll second.
We got the second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, so that passes.
Okay, and the second item, as I mentioned, is also related to the pavilion, and this is public news at this point in terms of a change in name. Has been announced as of last week. It went to the city council last night, was approved by resolution that is very similar to yours. Essentially, the documents that lease the pavilion and to CEDA, and then CEDA to the operator, have a clause regarding naming rights built in, and it requires approval of both the city council and the EDA. There heretofore have not been any issues that have been problematic with regard to this, but it is a kind of a safety, if you will, for public entities that want to are concerned with image and branding and things of that nature. So that clause is built in. It's being honored. This is the second time a change of this type has come through. And in this case, a local, somewhat local, at least a local presence, Ting Internet is the company that is engaged I think it's a 5-year period, to have their name positioned on the pavilion. It doesn't change anything with regard to any of the other arrangements. It's just simply a approval that has to occur. And as I mentioned last night, the council approved their resolution. This is also included in your packet, as well as the package of materials that went to the city council that kind of remind them of the sections of the lease and the different sections of the code that would apply here. So that's in there for information. And then there's a resolution, it's about a half-page resolution towards the back of your packet that speaks to this item.
So Ting is paying the Charlottesville Pavilion LLC for the name?
That's correct.
Okay.
So Chris, again, process here. I'm just curious. Why do I hear about it on like Facebook or NBC 29 first before we get the resolution? What if we say no, in other words? We gotta walk that back?
It's an interesting situation, and it comes about due to the nature of public meetings and public notice. If you read the fine print, of course, Facebook probably wouldn't have included the fine print, but if you read the fine print on the announcement, which they made last Wednesday, there was something to the effect of pending approval. And that's to reflect the idea that they do need to seek the city council and the EDA's approval. This is one of those things where the company doing the sponsorship likes to make the announcement, as you might imagine. And given the fact that the city council has notice requirements that say the materials need to be put out in advance for the public to look at, that kind of can get in the way of that. So my advice to the applicants is to always try and time that in a way that they are able to control the announcement, but leave room for the approval to occur in a timely fashion. So that's what was attempted here. And they were able to announce it last Wednesday. The material went out to the city council and to you all at about the same time last week. And so that's the reasoning behind that.
Okay, I appreciate it.
Yeah.
It's just they've already created the website. I just find it very odd. It's totally
fine. It's one of those things that it's and the language is the way it's written in the leases is that if there's no response, it's automatically approved type of thing. If there were a disfavorable response, I think we would have some legal standing to do something. But it was, I guess, a calculated risk on their part to go ahead and move forward with the idea, knowing that the name was not necessarily controversial.
This isn't sponsored by a vaping company, so I guess we're probably okay, right?
No comment.
Any more discussion on the Ting Pavilion proposal? Well, last chance to exercise some real power here. All right, do we have a motion to approve the renaming of the Charlottesville Pavilion, the Sprint Pavilion?
So moved.
So moved.
All right, that's second. I take that as a second. The second voice is there all in favor say aye?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. So that passes. And we're on to other business and announcements.
Yeah, just one item to bring to your attention, and I'm probably going to share my screen here to show a little bit of this document to you, but we have been working internally in our office on a recovery roadmap to help businesses recover following COVID and the pandemic impacts. I want to thank, I believe Jim Cawthon was a participant in at least one one of our sessions, we had a series of focus group type sessions with business stakeholders earlier in the year. We refined those findings into this document that I'm going to show you that is going to be discussed with the city council in a couple of weeks, just to brief them on it. And the intention is that we will request some supplemental American Rescue Plan funds from the council. The city is receiving an allocation from the federal government, and we will request some funds to help support this recovery roadmap. And some of these items, and I'll show as I walk through this, some of these items you will recognize as being programs that the EDA supports, and some of our budget allocation for FY22 is already earmarked in such a way to be supportive of some of these items. So you should be seeing on your screen a document entitled Recovery Roadmap with the date of 5/26/21 on it. So it looks like you all are seeing that good. I know it's a little small, but hopefully you'll get the gist. I'm not going to read through each of these items, but essentially we met, we did a series of outreach efforts, including a series of phone calls that was led by Jason Ness on our team with previous recipients of our grants from last year to find out how they're doing, see what their needs were. That was followed by a number of focus groups that were facilitated by an economic development facilitator that helped us work through some of these issues. And then those were refined into a document. There's about a 15-page document that supports this that I'm not going to share with you today. We'll share that via email for you to look through, but that's the narrative piece. And this is the graphical piece that indicates the key areas of focus. So we found 4 basic buckets in which there was desire for additional assistance, and not surprisingly, financial assistance was an area of concern. And we have a couple of items in this bucket that are relevant to the EDA. And 2 of those are the grants, which is the BRACE grant, which stands for Building Resiliency Among Charlottesville Entrepreneurs. That was a program that was launched in May of last year as a specific response to the pandemic and funded with reserve dollars that the EDA allocated for this purpose. So we intend to do 2 additional rounds of that over the next year to assist businesses that are changing their business models due to the pandemic, and whatever they're proposing for the grant funds will actually help them with that pivot and will help them become more resilient in the process. The other is the ACE grant, which is a long-standing, probably our longest standing grant that EDA has had interaction with, and members of the EDA have served on the review panel when we have presenting businesses that come to present for the ACE grant. So we would expect to do that for our smaller businesses as well during the next year or 2. Just a few highlights of the first bucket of financial assistance. The next focus area would be training and resources, and this includes some of our programming around workforce development for individuals, as well as assistance to companies that are hiring or training within their current frameworks. Some of you will recognize the Go Hire program, which is our wage subsidy and incumbent training program. And we would expect to do that over the next year to help, as well as potentially working on some items focused on the hospitality sector, given the impact there. And we have some ideas working with potentially with our county partner on some ideas there. So just to give you a sense of what's in that category. The third major focus area is on infrastructure. And there's a couple items there that we would seek to have some impact on. One of them is a unique opportunity that is now available to municipalities to seek out what are called designated outdoor refreshment areas. And these are areas in which alcoholic beverages can be served in an outdoor environment without putting up essentially the traditional kind of hard barriers that people might be accustomed to for these type of things. This is a little bit of an outgrowth of some changes that the state was able to make with the ABC board last year due to the pandemic. And we see it as a positive development for opportunity here in Charlottesville, particularly given the downtown mall. It sets itself up nicely for this type of activity. This does require the city council to approve an ordinance, and it does have some other kind of internal policy issues that have to be worked out. But the city manager has given us the green light to at least begin exploring this. And Jason on our team here is kind of leading the charge on that. So we're hopeful that that comes about. It's not quite there yet, but it's an item that we would push forward on as part of this recovery. Moving on quickly to the fourth bucket, which is marketing and advertising. We have a couple of elements there. One of note for you all is the Buy Local campaign, which we did in partnership with the county over the holiday season last year on a kind of a pilot basis. It went fairly well. So we're planning to launch that on an annual basis, so to cover an entire year in partnership with the county. And some of the CEDA dollars will go to support that as we move into that this year. The other two items are our marketing leverage grant program and a co-op advertising program that, provided we get some of the ARP dollars, we would initiate one or both of those to assist local businesses with their advertising as they come back full steam ahead here going into the summer and fall. So that's just a quick overview I wanted to provide of the four big categories. The process here, our time frame on this is about the next 12 to 18 months time period. So we wanted to be intentional about trying to help kind of that relaunch and re-engagement for the businesses. And we also were intentional about trying to engage in things where the Office of Economic Development and or CEDA can have an impact. And we feel like we can engage in whatever the item is and have not necessarily control, but be able to influence it in a way that can be successful and not try and take on something that's outside of our purview, so to speak. So all these items, some of these look familiar for that reason, and then others of these are new, but are responsive to the comments we heard from the focus groups and the follow-up calls and the business survey that we did earlier in the year. So you'll see and hear more about this, but I wanted to give you all a highlight, and we will share the narrative document with you for your reading enjoyment following the meeting. And if you have comments, it is still a draft, so we'd be happy to receive those as this moves along. If there are any questions at the moment, I'd be happy to try and answer those. And I will stop the share there and we'll go back to our live screen. Any questions?
So the idea with the outdoor refreshment areas is that you could theoretically walk down the mall with a alcoholic beverage
yes, in general, within there's be some boundaries obviously to that, but it wouldn't be that hard barrier situation. It would be some signage that would say you're entering or exiting. Some details to be worked out with that. There's a particular type of cup that would have to be used and some things like that, but not quite Bourbon Street, but a more toned down version that would potentially allow local nonprofits to engage in this process and have a benefit to them for, selling the cups or, providing the entertainment or something like that. So we're trying to make it a win-win for the business community that's downtown or wherever this would happen, but also the nonprofits that could potentially use this as somewhat of a fundraiser if it were available to them.
There are other areas besides downtown under consideration?
Yeah, it's the way the ordinance is written, or the way the code is written, is that it can apply to any public space. There's a separate piece of the code that allows this to happen on private property with permission of the property owner. But this could potentially overlay on, a park or a street or some other public space as well. It's not specific to the downtown mall.
UVA, sporting events, stuff like that.
Potentially, yeah, depending on where it is, given the boundaries of the university and the city and county, yes.
Well, any other questions on that presentation?
No questions, but it all sounds great.
Yeah.
Good job.
All right. Well, very efficient 30-minute meeting. Thank you, Chris, and to the other staff members for joining us, and the new members, welcome. Really glad to have you guys aboard. Jim and I only started a couple of months ago ourselves, so we've got a bunch of newbies here. Jay O'Donnell's Old Man River right now on this group, but and I'm only the vice chair. Usually Ed Schmitz is the chair, and he's got a couple more years and more experience doing this, so I guess he'll be with us the next time.
Yeah, Ed couldn't be here today, so thank you for chairing the meeting, Addison, and thank everybody for tuning in a timely way, and appreciate your attention.
Great, thank you. Well, unless there's anything else, do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All right, second.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Well, thanks, Chris. Thanks, everybody.
All right.
See you
Thank
next
all.
time.
Have a good day. Cheers.
Take care.
Thank you.